Alright, welcome back to the Grob Chess Club, grob.2u.com. This is part 2 of lesson 6 in our lecture series on how to move up to class E. We just talked about the importance of tempo and material and attacking power when we're deciding when to trade. We're going to talk about pawn structure now. We brought it up in a few lessons before, the importance of it, and I'm going to keep bringing it up because a lot of amateurs tend to underestimate the importance of pawn structure. So let's say we have a game that goes e6. This is a French d4, e5, knight, bishop. This is called the winnower variation. You probably won't need to know that for quite some time. E5, c5, a3, and now black has to decide what to do with his bishop. He could retreat it to a5, or he could do some other things such as c takes d4, and the game gets pretty interesting. But instead decides to take on c3 because he's going to double up white's pawns. So now, as white, you might be thinking, well, my pawns are doubled, but it's really not hurting my game any. Because really, look, the c pawn on c3 is helping to protect d4, so if black ever, exchanges on d4, then we just take back and now our pawn structure is fine. And you also have to think that we've opened up a file for our rook. If our rook wants to go rook b1, now he's in the game. Black doesn't really have that choice right now. All of the files are closed for him. So by taking with that pawn, we've opened up files and we're increasing our control of the center. So this actually is a pretty even position. White is slightly better here, but this has been played many times by grandmasters, and so let's go to a different position. This is my favorite little Ruy Lopez exchange position where I always play bishop takes c6. And now a lot of amateurs, I'll find, take with the b pawn, because it's a general rule that when you have the choice to take with pawns, you want to try to take towards the center so you have more control of the center. But you really need to play d takes c6 in this position instead. The reason is that white's whole idea is that he's ahead in material, or he's not ahead in material, he's ahead in development, and black's only way to counter that is to increase his own development. So by taking with the d pawn, he has now created an escape hatch for his light squared bishop to come out to either like e6 or to g4, and now his queen is free. His queen has an open file. So even though he didn't take toward the center, he's really developed his queen and his bishop in the same move. And for those of you who hadn't seen it, don't think that this e5 pawn is hanging, because you'll very quickly run into queen d4, and it's not pretty. So that's another general rule, though, is that you usually want to take toward the center unless you evaluate it as more important to develop your pieces instead. Okay, so let's say in this position you are black and you've just played knight f6, and now white decides he's going to take. He takes bishop takes f6. Now what are you going to do? Both of the moves, g takes f6 and e takes f6, are good. They are both fine. You just have to look at the advantages of each move. If you take e takes f6, well, now you've developed a place for your dark squared bishop to go. He can go along this diagonal, all the way along here. He can maybe deliver check if c4 is ever played. And now you've sort of increased your control over the center. You have control over e5 with this f6 pawn. The other way to go, I actually like this better, g takes f6. A lot of people at the amateur level are reluctant to do this because they think that they're making their king side too open, and now they're going to be open to attack, and they think somehow, magically, they're going to get mated in 5 more moves or something. But really, it's not bad at all. Notice that you still have a place for your dark squared bishop to go. He can always go to like h6 if, say, white ever castles queenside. He can even go bishop g7 maybe at some point if you want to castle kingside. But later, usually what I want to do in this position is I'll later try to play e6, and then now the bishop has that diagonal to go along as well. But the point is that this g pawn, by taking toward the center, I've really stopped any kind of counterplay that white's going to have. I've got so much control over this e5 square and also this g5 square, so any piece he tries to maneuver, say if he tries to go knight f3, the knight f3 is not going to be able to go to g5 because he's stopped by the f6 pawn. But notice that in either way, if you want to take E or G takes f6, that there's advantages to each one. And maybe you won't run across this exact position in your games, but the ideas are still going to be the same. You have to evaluate whether you want more control over the center or whatnot. You just have to, maybe it's more a point of taste, which you prefer. So, but I just want to let you know that taking with either pawn here is fine. Alright, on a closing note, this has been a shorter lecture than the first one, so I guess a little extra time to talk about it here. Is somebody asked me why they have a trouble with losing to lower rated opponents a lot of the time. And it can be a number of things, but I think in my experience, when I've lost to lower rated players, it's usually because I underestimate them. I remember one time where I could have qualified for a state tournament if I would have just beaten this one person. It was a girl, which didn't help because at the time I didn't, it's sad to say I didn't think that the girl was going to be able to beat me, and she was lower rated than me, so I didn't really respect her, which is a huge mistake. You always want to respect your opponents and think that they'll make the best moves. So anyway, I moved too quickly in those games, and I ended up losing, and I didn't qualify for state because of it. And it's a lesson that you have to learn. But you never want to underestimate your opponents, and that means not making tricky moves, trappy moves, which you never want to do anyway. And also taking your time, especially. You don't want to rush your moves. By rushing your moves, you're essentially saying that you don't need any extra time to beat them, when really your rating is dependent upon you playing your best. It's based upon how you play at your best level, and if you're moving too quickly, then you're really not giving yourself a fair shot. You're not being, it's not representing who you really are as a chess player. So, to that person out there who asked why they lose to lower rated opponents, well, maybe it's just because you're not giving them the time of day. You really need to, take your time and just play your normal game against them. Alright, so for Grob Chess Club, grob.2u.com, this has been Gerald Roberts signing off. I hope you join us for our last lecture in this series, and that's it. Have a good one.